In a region already scarred by decades of war and political instability, the unraveling relationship between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban marks a significant and dangerous geopolitical shift. For years, Pakistan nurtured the Afghan Taliban, envisioning them as a means to secure strategic depth against India and influence the future of Afghanistan. But now, that alliance is crumbling, and the divorce is turning hostile. What was once a covert partnership is rapidly degenerating into a volatile standoff, with grave consequences for regional security, diplomacy, and humanitarian stability. A partnership built on strategy, not a trust. Pakistan's alliance with the Afghan Taliban was never about shared ideology or mutual admiration. It was a transactional arrangement rooted in strategic calculus. Islamabad provided sanctuary, training, and diplomatic support to the Taliban during their insurgency against U.S.-backed governments in Kabul. In return, Pakistan expected a pliant neighbor and a buffer against Indian influence in Afghanistan. When the Taliban returned to power in August 2021, following the chaotic U.S. withdrawal, Pakistani officials hoped to finally cash in on their long-term investment. But the new Taliban government had its own priorities, and Islamabad's expectations quickly proved unrealistic. The Taliban's refusal to crack down on the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, TTP, a Pakistani Taliban faction responsible for hundreds of deadly attacks inside Pakistan, stunned and frustrated Pakistani leaders. The TTP resurgence, a strategic blowback. The TTP, long targeted by Pakistani military operations, found renewed strength and sanctuary in post-2021 Afghanistan. With the Taliban in power and unwilling to confront their ideological kin, the TTP regrouped, rearmed, and reasserted its insurgency across Pakistan's northwestern tribal belt. Cross-border attacks surged, with militants slipping easily through the porous frontier. Pakistan's attempts at diplomacy, including multiple rounds of talks facilitated by the Afghan Taliban, yielded no lasting results. Instead of suppressing the TTP, the Taliban offered vague promises while defending their sovereignty and ideological proximity to fellow Islamist militants. The situation deteriorated further in 2024 and 2025 as TTP fighters launched increasingly bold attacks against military and civilian targets in Pakistan, prompting Islamabad to take a more aggressive approach. Airstrikes and border tensions escalate. In March 2025, Pakistan launched a series of airstrikes inside eastern Afghanistan, targeting what it claimed were TTP hideouts. While tactically successful, these strikes sparked a furious reaction from the Taliban government, which condemned the bombings and reported dozens of civilian casualties, including women and children. The Taliban retaliated with harsh rhetoric and a military buildup along the Afghan-Pakistan border. Relations, already fragile, plummeted. The once open, if chaotic, border crossings were shuttered, halting trade and stranding thousands of travelers. Pakistan, fearing further infiltration by militants, hardened its frontier and intensified military operations in its border provinces. Refugees and reprisals, a humanitarian fallout. Beyond military posturing, the deterioration in bilateral ties has triggered a humanitarian crisis. Citing security concerns, Pakistan began a large-scale crackdown on Afghan refugees, many of whom fled the Taliban regime or earlier conflicts. By early 2025, more than 400,000 Afghans were deported or forced to return voluntarily, often under harsh conditions and without adequate support systems in place. Human rights organizations have condemned Pakistan's actions, warning that deported women's rights activists, minority groups, and former government employees face imprisonment or worse under the Taliban regime. Afghanistan's already collapsing economy has been further strained by the sudden influx of displaced people and the severing of cross-border commerce, diplomatic isolation, and strategic reassessment. Pakistan's traditional strategy of using proxy groups and ideological allies to achieve its foreign policy objectives is now facing an existential crisis. The Taliban's refusal to curb the TTP not only undermines Pakistan's internal security, but also exposes Islamabad's declining influence in Kabul. For the Afghan Taliban, defying Pakistan offers a chance to assert sovereignty and ideological consistency, but at the risk of greater international isolation and renewed conflict on multiple fronts. For Pakistan, the growing threat of domestic terrorism, strained relations with both Kabul and Western allies, and a worsening refugee crisis are all signs of a policy in freefall. With the strategic buffer turning into a hostile front, Islamabad is being forced to reevaluate its assumptions and options. The possibility of direct conflict with the Taliban, while still remote, is no longer unthinkable. Unstable allies, uncertain future, the messy divorce between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban has turned what was once a tactical alliance into a dangerous rivalry. As the TTP exploits Afghan territory to reignite its insurgency, and as Pakistan responds with force and deportations, both countries are sinking deeper into a cycle of retaliation and distrust. This unraveling has wider implications, not only for South Asia's stability, but also for global counterterrorism efforts. In the end, Pakistan's decades-long gamble on the Taliban has backfired spectacularly. Instead of strategic depth, it now faces strategic peril. And unless cooler heads prevail, the region may be heading toward yet another chapter of violence, displacement, and instability.